Welcome to Being at Home with George. I'm excited that we're coming up on 3 years of doing At Home with George. And initially, when we started Being at Home with George during COVID, that was the title that we used for these episodes. And the idea was the reason behind even starting this was because I wanted to help folks manage COVID, especially being locked down. In some ways, I feel like we're still locked down because of fear. Fear locks us down, locks us in. And you could see it during COVID, like during the food shortages. Some of them, not just food, but also paper products and some of the things that we use. And one of the things that stores had to do was limit what people could buy because people would buy like 6 months worth because they were afraid. But then that meant that other people that needed to get stuff couldn't get it. And so because of the fear of not being able to have access to this stuff, we buy more and we actually create the very thing we fear. And so this idea of realizing that I'm afraid, so I'm going to get more than I really need now, which doesn't leave much for anyone else. And I just experienced this a couple of days ago because here in the Northeast, it was forecasted that we were going to get this nor'easter. And so when I went to the grocery store to get what I normally get, it was crowded and they were running out of things because people were getting things because of the storm. They were buying more than they normally buy. So the fear of not having enough is actually creating the actual thing of not having enough, if that makes any sense. And, it's all serious, but you can see the same thing with the banks. There were two banks that failed, and now it's rippled and affected all the other banks because people are afraid of losing their money. And this is interesting because the government has assured, and President Biden went on and said that we'll honor deposits. Now, the interesting thing, I don't believe most people have more than $250,000 in the bank, but the normal insurance would cover 250, but he made it unlimited. Yet people are still going out and taking money out of their banks and creating the very issue where some of the banks beyond those two banks could fail because people are afraid and taking their money out. And it's being driven by fear. So they're locked into this way of being, which is not the most skillful and wise way. But because of fear, there's no space between stimulus and response, and we're in survival mode, and we're not able to see beyond the moment, beyond the current situation. And so, one of the things that we've been teaching in this process is let's talk about fear. How to deal with this fear. How you deal with it is embrace the fear, say yes to it, and generate hope. Now, what that does, it gets us in a growth mode. It gets us into creating space between stimulus and response. And in that space, we have the freedom and power to choose. So we choose the idea and open to the idea that, okay, yeah, so my money is safe. Why do I take it out? Taking it out is making it unsafe or making banks fail, which is going to have a ripple effect. And you can see it with the stock market and whatnot. And so the idea is, as FDR talked about, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And if you think about the acronym of fear, is false evidence appearing real. So the idea is, how do you embrace it, say yes to it, and generate the hope? You say, yes, I am afraid of losing my money, and the government will make sure the deposits are secured. So knowing that, I can let go of the fear and just trust that it's going to be all right. I don't have to get my money, which is actually creating the very thing that I'm afraid of. And I don't know if you folks watched It's a Wonderful Life, but they had to run on the bank because of a rumor. And the lead character, was able to say to them, well, you don't need all your money, just take a little bit out. And that way, they were able to prevent the bank from failing because everybody was taking their money out, even though they weren't going to do anything with it, but they were afraid of losing it. So just think about this idea that anytime we do things out of fear, it's going to lead to suffering. It's going to lead to unwise decisions. And so that's why a big part of what we've been teaching in these episodes is this idea of embracing, saying yes to everything, and then generating a hope and seeing it as an opportunity to learn something and not do things out of fear because that creates more suffering. And when we fear something, we actually bring it about by letting the fear dictate what our actions are. And so we do this every day, is the fear. We fear something, we're fear somebody's going to leave us or whatever, and we might end up unconsciously creating the situation that people want to leave us, or we're afraid of losing our job and we end up losing our job because we're doing things unconsciously that are creating the very thing we say. Because if we say, don't lose that job, the unconscious, the subconscious doesn't recognize the don't, and then we actually create that. And I'll share one story that I had for myself when I was working in a corporate environment, and I'd be dressed in a nice suit and tie and a nice shirt, and I'd go and eat in this Italian restaurant. This is early on in my career, and I was afraid of getting spaghetti on it because I used to like the chicken cacciatore. And I put the napkin in there and I'd eat it. And then after I finish it, I take the napkin off and then I accidentally drop the fork in the plate and splatters the tomato sauce on my new tie and shirt. So that's my own experience of knowing that the fear actually creates it. And then since then, I don't worry about throwing stuff on my shirt. And I don't, because I'm not coming from, I'm trying not to do something and end up doing it. I just say, okay, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm not going to fear it. I'm going to have faith. I'm going to embrace it. And if I spill something on my tie, then I'll just get it clean. I'll get a new tie. It's that simple. So that's what we've been teaching here, is to say yes to the fear and generate hope. And in that space between stimulus and response, we're coming out of love. We're coming out of growth mode, not out of survival